Growing up, my mother had a very particular and often understated way of offering life advice. It wasn't always direct, sometimes it was a fleeting glance, a deeply resonant sigh, or a carefully recounted story about someone she once knew. Always with a moral woven subtly into its fabric. But the most memorable, and perhaps the most profoundly effective, piece of cautionary wisdom she ever imparted came in the form of a rather cryptic yet potent warning. Beware the woman I warn you about. It wasn't a warning about a specific individual with a name and a face, but rather a type, a discernible persona, a collection of subtle yet dangerous traits that, she believed, spelled undeniable trouble for an impressionable and often naive young woman like myself. And as I tentatively navigated the increasingly complex social landscapes of adolescence, and then the intricate web of young adulthood, her words, though abstract and initially difficult to fully grasp, often echoed with surprising clarity in the quieter corners of my mind. These echoes shaped my perceptions, influenced my choices, and subtly guided my interactions in ways that I didn't fully appreciate or even recognize until much, much later in life. The woman my mother warned me about wasn't a cartoonish villain or an overt enemy lurking in the shadows. In fact, she was often remarkably charming, intensely magnetic, and outwardly seemed immensely successful, possessing all the qualities one might initially admire. But underneath that meticulously polished exterior, my mother, with her uncanny intuition and deep understanding of human nature, always intuited that there lay a deeper, more insidious, and potentially destructive current. This particular woman, as my mother meticulously described her through various anecdotes and observations, was a true master of manipulation, a skilled weaver of intricate webs of emotional and psychological dependency. She thrived on maintaining absolute control, on being the undeniable center of every social interaction, and on subtly, yet consistently undermining others to elevate her own perceived status and importance. She wouldn't confront you directly, not with open aggression or harsh words. Instead, she'd plant insidious seeds of doubt, offering what appeared to be genuine compliments but were, in reality, backhanded critiques disguised as sincere concern. Or, she'd leverage your deepest vulnerabilities, your unspoken fears, and your personal insecurities for her own calculated gain. Her power wasn't rooted in overt aggression or brute force, but in a quiet, almost imperceptible erosion of your self-esteem, your confidence, and ultimately, your personal agency. My mother painstakingly taught me to recognize these subtle, almost hidden signs the way she'd invariably, and often quite deftly, turn every conversation back to herself, even when you were courageously sharing your own deeply personal struggles or triumphs. The way she'd offer unsolicited advice that, while appearing helpful, subtly and continuously questioned your judgment, making you second-guess your every decision. The way she'd meticulously cultivate a profound sense of obligation in those around her, making them feel perpetually indebted for even the smallest, most insignificant favors, thereby ensuring their loyalty and compliance. And most tellingly, the way she'd effortlessly deflect and shift blame, never, ever taking genuine responsibility for her own significant missteps or shortcomings. It wasn't about being mean-spirited in a direct, confrontational way. It was about a relentless, all-consuming self-interest that bordered on the truly predatory, consuming the emotional resources of those in her orbit. For many years, I honestly struggled to fully grasp the intricate nuances and profound implications of this somewhat abstract warning. I encountered a myriad of different women in my life. Some were profoundly kind and genuinely supportive. Others were less so, some were truly empathetic, while others were noticeably more self-absorbed and superficial. But none of them, it seemed, fit the exact, amorphous mold my mother had so vaguely but powerfully described. I often wondered if her warning was perhaps an overgeneralization, a product of her own complex past experiences, or simply a clever pedagogical tool designed to instill a healthy and necessary skepticism in me about human nature. Yet, the seed was undeniably planted deep within my consciousness, and I found myself observing social interactions with a newfound, almost analytical, lens, meticulously searching for the subtle tells, the quiet manipulations, the hidden agendas she had alluded to. Then, as I confidently entered my late 20s, a pivotal and often transformative period in one's life, I met her. Not a single person who perfectly embodied all the traits, but a composite figure. A living embodiment of all the cautionary tales and whispered warnings my mother had ever shared. She was brilliantly intelligent, articulate to a fault, and fiercely ambitious. Possessing an almost intimidating drive, on the surface, she was everything I had consciously admired and aspired to be. She exuded an effortless confidence, commanded immediate respect in any room she entered, and seemed to effortlessly achieve her ambitious goals with remarkable ease. We connected almost instantly, drawn together by shared intellectual interests, professional ambitions, and a seemingly mutual understanding of the world. She quickly became a mentor figure, a trusted confidant, and for a significant period of time, a truly inspiring and invigorating presence in my life, pushing me to be better. But gradually, insidiously, and almost imperceptibly at first, the minute cracks in her facade began to show, widening slowly to reveal the underlying structure my mother had cautioned me about. The compliments she offered, while initially flattering, often felt subtly laced with a veiled critique, a gentle undermining. Her advice, while ostensibly helpful and well-intentioned, often subtly steered me away from opportunities that might have elevated me too close to her own standing or threatened her perceived dominance. She possessed a remarkable ability to make me feel incredibly special, uniquely talented, and profoundly valued, and yet, simultaneously, deeply dependent on her constant validation and approval. If I achieved something significant on my own merit, she'd find a way to subtly diminish it, attributing it to mere luck, favorable circumstances, or external factors rather than my own hard work. If I bravely shared a struggle or a vulnerability, she'd listen with seemingly profound empathy and attentiveness, only to then subtly shift the focus back to her own similar, but always more dramatic, more impactful, and more emotionally charged experiences. It was a constant, exhausting dance of elevation and subtle undermining, a psychological push and pull that left me perpetually seeking her approval, desperate for her affirmation, while simultaneously feeling a dull, persistent ache of inadequacy and self-doubt. The friendship, which had once felt so vibrant and enriching, slowly but surely devolved into a draining, emotionally exhausting cycle. I found myself constantly second-guessing my own intuition, doubting my inherent abilities, and feeling an unshakable, almost compulsive need to please her, to gain her favor. My triumphs, which should have been celebrated independently, felt significantly less meaningful without her explicit acknowledgement, and my failures felt disproportionately magnified by her quiet, often unspoken judgment. The conversations, initially stimulating, intellectually engaging, and mutually beneficial, slowly but inevitably devolved into lengthy monologues, where I was primarily relegated to the role of an attentive audience, a passive sounding board for her ideas, her grievances, her meticulously crafted self-promotion, and her incessant need for validation. I slowly realized, being used, not in an overtly malicious or cruel way, but with a calculated, almost casual indifference that was, in its own way, even more unsettling than outright malice. It was then, in the quiet solitude of my own reflection, that my mother's sagacious words truly resonated with profound clarity and impact. I could almost physically hear her voice, not just in the fading recesses of my memory, but almost tangibly, echoing in the quiet chambers of my mind, meticulously pointing out the subtle patterns, the undeniable telltale signs she had forewarned me about. The way this woman subtly yet effectively isolated me from other supportive connections and friendships, creating an emotional vacuum. The way she meticulously crafted the illusion that our bond was utterly unique, truly irreplaceable, and profoundly special, thereby significantly increasing my reliance and dependence on her for emotional sustenance. The way she would drop artfully disguised hints about my perceived shortcomings or deficiencies, not through direct accusation, but through a seemingly innocent, shared anecdote about someone else who had made a similar, regrettable mistake, allowing me to draw the unflattering comparison myself. It was, I finally understood, a masterclass in sophisticated psychological manipulation, cleverly cloaked in the deceptive guise of genuine friendship and nurturing mentorship. The realization was both painful and liberating, a bitter pill to swallow, yet one that brought with it undeniable clarity. I had, after all, invested so much precious emotional energy, so much unwavering trust, so much of my own sense of self into this seemingly significant relationship. But once I was finally able to see it through my mother's prescient lens, once I fully understood and identified the insidious patterns she had so wisely warned me about, the clarity was absolutely undeniable, almost blinding in its intensity.